This morning's reading will be from John 19, verses 1 through to 16, titled, Jesus Sentenced to be Crucified. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. The soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head. They clothed him in a purple robe and went up to him again and again, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they slapped him in the face. Once more Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis for a charge against him." When Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify! Crucify!" But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to that law he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." So when Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus, but Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize that I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of the Passover. It was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, "Take him away! Take him away! Crucify him!" "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified.
This first talk I've called So Close to the Truth. What really struck me is that several of the main protagonists or people in this story, they're so close to the truth about Jesus, and yet frustratingly they can't see it. It comes in verse 38 of the previous chapter, chapter 18, where Pilate says, "What is truth?" And there the irony of it is that he's standing so close to the one who is the way, the life, and the truth. And all that is true about creation sort of emanates from Jesus, even in these moments of suffering. And Pilate, although he's so close, he can't see it. And then we have the soldiers. As chapter 19 begins, they put a crown of thorns on his head, they dress him in a purple robe, and then it says they went up to him again and again and they said, "Hail, King of the Jews!" Do you see how frustrating it is? Those soldiers are so close to the truth, and yet they cannot see it. And then again, Pilate again, when he brings Jesus out to the crowd in verse 5, he says to them, Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." It's almost as though Pilate is touching on an incredible truth, that we believe that Jesus is the one who is both fully divine and fully human at the same time. That's the meaning of the incarnation, God becoming man, that he might eventually die upon the cross. And Pilate, although he doesn't realize it, is almost though he's announcing, here is the most complete example of what a human being is meant to be. Here is man, here is mankind demonstrated in Jesus. And yet Pilate, he doesn't understand some of the depth almost of the words that he's saying. And then when again Pilate brings Jesus out to the crowd, Here we are in verse 14. He says to them, "Here is your king," he says to the Jews around him. And yet again, it's a true statement. But both Pilate and the Jews, although they're so close to the King of the Jews, they can't see him and they can't recognize him. How frustrating is that? And it just reminded me that we may know people, our friends maybe, who in some sense they may be searching and they're so close to the truth about Jesus, and yet they haven't really made that step of faith or come through to a living faith. Or we may even have people in our office or wherever we are who are quite antagonistic, and yet even in their aggression, they know something of the truth, perhaps more than they realize. And that's what's making them aggressive. But they're aggressive, but they're so close to the truth. And yet they too, they don't realize it. And what a wonderful time at Easter time to pray for some of these people that are in our minds, that they might see through to the truth and come to know the joy of knowing Jesus in their own lives.